She was only trying to make a living, just a young black woman with a small box of candy, walking from stranger to stranger, hoping someone would see her worth. But when one man finally stopped, his answer wasn't what she expected. It wasn't pity. It wasn't rejection. It was something so shocking, it would change the course of her life and reveal a truth about race and power that too many try to ignore. What could a simple act on the street expose about the world we live in today? It was supposed to be just another day. She stood on the corner with a small box of candy in her hands, cheap, colorful, and neatly lined up like treasures she hoped someone would see value in. Every sale meant a little food, a little hope, maybe enough to get through the week. Strangers passed by without looking, their eyes sliding past her as if she were invisible. But she didn't stop. She couldn't. Each no only made the weight of survival heavier. And then, just when she thought the day would end like all the others, one man paused. She didn't know it yet, but this simple encounter would tear open a story far bigger than a box of candy. She clutched the candy box a little tighter as the man stopped. For a moment, hope flickered. Maybe this would be her first sale of the day. But his eyes didn't soften. They scanned her up and down, lingering just long enough to remind her of every time she had been judged before. She forced a smile anyway, her voice steady but fragile. "Would you like to buy some candy, sir?" The words hung in the air. People, passing by, barely noticed. But for her, that moment stretched forever, because she had already heard enough rejections to know what often came next. The dismissive wave, the cold glare, the unspoken message that she didn't belong here. He didn't say no. Instead, he leaned closer and asked, "Why are you out here like this?" The question wasn't gentle. It was sharp, cutting, as if her presence itself needed justification. She explained quietly that she was just trying to earn enough for the week, that she didn't want to beg, that this was her way of holding on to dignity. But even as she spoke, she could see the disbelief on his face. Others walking by caught fragments of the conversation. A few smirked, some shook their heads. She felt their stares, the silent judgment pressing against her like a weight. It wasn't just about candy anymore. It was about who she was, the color of her skin, the assumptions that always followed. The man folded his arms. "People like you should find a real job," he muttered, loud enough for others to hear. Her throat tightened. It wasn't the first time she had heard those words, but the sting never faded. Every rejection carried the echo of a larger truth, that no matter how hard she tried, some people only saw her struggle as proof of her worthlessness. Still, she refused to step back. She steadied her voice and asked again if he would like to buy. This time something shifted. A small crowd began to form, curiosity pulling them closer. Whispers spread. Some pulled out their phones, recording. The tension thickened. Suddenly, this was no longer a simple exchange. It was a public stage, and she was trapped at the center. The man smirked as if he knew it too. Then, almost casually, he dropped a bill into her hand. But instead of walking away, he said something that froze her where she stood. "You won't be selling candy after today. You'll be living with me." The words hit like a lightning strike. Gasps rippled through the small crowd. Was it kindness? A threat? A test? She couldn't tell. All she knew was that in an instant, the story had changed, and what happened next would not only decide her future, but also expose a truth about power, race, and humanity that few were ready to face. Her heart pounded as the man's words echoed. "You'll be living with me." The crowd around them fell into a stunned silence, phones still recording. Every lens pointed at her trembling hands clutching the candy box. She wanted to speak, to push back, to reclaim her dignity, but the weight of every stare pressed her voice down. Was this generosity or humiliation disguised as kindness? The man's smile didn't help. It wasn't warm. It was performative, the kind of grin that said he wanted witnesses. And he had them. People whispered. Some even applauded, as if they were watching a spectacle instead of a woman's life hanging in the balance. Her chest tightened. This wasn't just about candy anymore. It was about power, about how easily her struggle could be twisted into entertainment. She looked at the money in her hand, felt its sharp corners against her palm, and realized it wasn't freedom. It was a reminder of how trapped she really was. And then came the breaking point. Someone in the crowd shouted, "She should be grateful!" The words sliced through her, igniting every memory of being told to accept less, to stay silent, to bow her head in exchange for scraps. Tears burned her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not here, not in front of them. The man stepped closer, towering over her. "So," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "are you coming with me or not?" In that moment, the world seemed to freeze. Her body screamed to move, to escape, but her pride held her in place. Every eye was waiting, demanding an answer. Would she give in, or would she risk everything to stand her ground? The choice she made next would not only define her future, it would expose the very heart of the injustice she had been forced to live with all along. She stood there, frozen, the crowd waiting for her response. And then, she shook her head, quietly at first, but firm enough for the man to hear. "No," she whispered. It wasn't defiance shouted at the top of her lungs. It was something stronger. The refusal to let her struggle become someone else's. "Performance!" the crowd murmured, some disappointed, some surprised. The man scoffed, tossing his hands up as if he were the victim, before walking away. Phones lowered, footsteps scattered, and just like that, the show was over. She was left, alone again with nothing but her candy box and the echo of what had just happened. But in that silence, something shifted. She hadn't gained money. She hadn't escaped poverty. What she had held on to, though, was dignity. Her choice to define herself, not to be defined by a stranger's staged generosity. That small act of resistance was more powerful than any dollar bill, because this wasn't just about her. It was about every person who's ever been told to accept humiliation in exchange for survival. Every black life treated like a spectacle, judged, dismissed, or reduced to stereotypes. Her story is a reminder that racism doesn't always scream. It often hides behind smiles, behind offers that seem generous but still carry the weight of control. And so the question remains, how many times must these stories repeat before we finally listen, not to the spectacle, but to the humanity at the center of it? Because in the end, it wasn't just about a woman selling candy. It was about whether we, as a society, are willing to see her as more than that.